Okay, thanks so much for having me. This presentation, The Magic of Mulch, I love talking about mulch, and I'm trying to encourage people to talk about it more, so I'm really happy that all of you are joining us today. And I also wanted to tell you a little bit more about upcoming opportunities that are within my program and the people that I get to work with. So if you haven't heard of it yet, there's a webinar series that's ongoing. It's called Ready, Set, Grow. And the link for it I will put in the chat. And so these are the upcoming classes. So tomorrow is the next one, and that's with Dr. Amanda Skidmore, Pests in the Home Garden. So that is a really good one to attend if you can. And you don't worry if you can't attend the one live. We do record these also, and so all of these Ready, Set, Grow series are going to be, they're available on that website too. So here's the website in the chat. See if I can do all these things at once. Chat. Okay. So then another one is this water conservation home, yard, farm, and ranch. This is starting Thursday, May 20th, and is going to be several weeks on Thursday nights. And so this series includes water conservation in the home, xeriscaping, more about water conservation in your yard, water-wise vegetables, and farm and ranch. Another event that's coming up, and you can go to the Native Plant Society website in New Mexico to find this one. I'm going to be giving a presentation more for new gardeners, so basic botany and plant ID for gardeners. So that should be fun, and that's going to be in a few weeks. Okay. Let's see, am I sharing? Make sure I'm sharing the right one. Yep, okay. All right, then, so getting into mulch. I love this picture because crocus are beautiful, but also because the mulch underneath it is so gorgeous. So I think that there is a need in our culture to shift perspective, to be thinking that mulch is as beautiful as the flowers that we plant in it. So I encourage you to keep an eye out when you see mulch that looks good. Take a picture of it and make note of it, because the trends do change. You know, styles change through time, and mulch is becoming more popular because we need it. We need it because of climate change and because of drought and low water resources, even in a non-drought year. So I think y'all are familiar with this USDA plant hardiness zone map. So I'm just going to touch on it for a minute. These are numbers, zones that are assigned different areas based on the average annual extreme low temperatures. So I encourage you, anytime you see a map like this, to really think about the date that it was created and the data that it's based on. So this is the most recent USDA hardiness zone map. It's the 2012 map, and the data, and you can see it, that they happen to put it right on the image for us. The data is 1976 to 2005. So each year, the coldest temperature recorded in the entire year is selected, and then between those years, they average. And so according to that data, and according to one of the zip codes in your area, you are in zone 6, which means that your average annual extreme low is maybe -10 to 0. And I don't know if you got that cold this year. But here, check this out. There's also this zone 6B. So 6B is that, so you can divide up each of these zones into 2 portions. So that's basically a average extreme low of -5 to 0. So if y'all know how to use your thumbs up button or your thumbs down, so thumbs up if that seems about right to you, or thumbs down if you think you got colder in your area, or I guess maybe not everybody's in Los Alamos, but any thumbs? Scanning. Okay,
yeah, we got some.
All right, thanks guys. All right, so that's encouraging. And so I'm on the right track, and so it's possible that this data, if we were to pick data from the last 20 years, maybe we still would be at zone 6 for you. But these, again, remember, these are the cold temperatures. So it's not just the cold that we're worried about. But in general, you can take these plant hardiness zone maps and compare them and see the changes that are happening. So I just warned you about not accepting maps of data that you don't know the data range for, but I don't have the data range for these. But this is a image to help us understand how things are changing. So the first thing I noticed, I circled your zone 6 there, between 1990 and 2015, and these two maps are that dark purple zone 3 has really shrunk a lot. But then when you zoom in on New Mexico, or just focus in on New Mexico, at first glance, maybe it doesn't look quite too different, but notice on the eastern side of the state that a lot of the state used to be green, that was zone 6, and now in zone 7, or 6 years ago, zone 7. And so those changes are happening. And remember that just because maybe a color didn't change, you could still change average temperature without changing your USDA hardiness zone, because you may have moved within that 10-degree zone, but still be in that zone 6 definition. So some things to think about. Evapotranspiration is an important one to think about too. So evapotranspiration, we think about water movement through plants, that's called transpiration. That's how water goes from the soil into the roots, up through the tree, and out into the air, surrounding air, as water vapor. And so here's one definition, that evapotranspiration is the transfer of water from all of the Earth's surfaces to the air. And so that includes the soil, pools, lakes, oceans, plant surfaces. So it includes transpiration. So evapotranspiration is something that we're especially interested in because of the increases in temperature, also increases rates of evapotranspiration. So in that little map, I know it's kind of small there, that's just the data from this week, showing evapotranspiration rates in New Mexico over the last week. So even and it's a very cool week, it's extremely cool here tonight. Also through this website, I found I was trying to find evapotranspiration data that was real quick and punchy for our climate, but this is the closest I found. These are some numbers that were provided by EPA.gov at this new water budget data finder website. And they suggested that in Albuquerque, the evapotranspiration rate is an average of 10.64 inches per month. And it didn't say which years this was based on, and that the rainfall, we know we get so little rain. So the point being here that we are there's so much water loss from our surfaces and from our plants. It's way more than the amount of rainfall, even if it was a good year as far as monsoon, and if it was a plentiful year for us, it's still very small amount of water, and our evapotranspiration rates are much higher. This is a rule of thumb I've used for a while. This is based on John Mexel, his research, and Dr. Mexel was a tree physiologist who's now retired, and he gave me a bunch of his old slides. So the exercise here is this rule of thumb, that a 1 degree Fahrenheit increase in temperature increases evapotranspiration by 1%. We just learned that evapotranspiration is all of that collective water loss. So that means that in this example of Albuquerque, if Albuquerque has 1,800 irrigated acres in parks and golf courses, and if they use the allotted 42 inches of water per acre per year, then a 1 degree Fahrenheit increase in temperature, and we already said that increases water use, total water use, by 1%, and that's only 0.42 inches. So 1%, but remember that's an increase on top of regular use. So that means an increase evapotranspiration of over 11,000 gallons per acre per year. And that is an increase of 21 million gallons per year on top of the normal. So normal heat issues and how much water is lost from evapotranspiration. And that's only in this one example of city maintained parks and golf courses in this one town. So as temperatures are going up, as average temperatures go up, we are seeing higher evapotranspiration rates. And so what does that mean? So water use has increased and will continue to increase. What happens if I don't want to, or if I can't increase my water budget? If you had a 1 degree Fahrenheit increase, we can expect decreased plant quality, decreased green area, accept more plant disease, accept more plant mortality. And Carol Sutherland, Dr. Sutherland just retired in February. She was our extension entomologist and the state entomologist with NMDA. And something she said before she left is that she's really worried about us with this year in plant diagnoses. We are getting so many more questions each summer now of pests and diseases, but the underlying issue is drought stress and heat stress, and soil compaction and not good enough water application. Even if water's applied in at a really high amount, maybe it's not being applied in the right spots, and so it's still not helping the tree. So we already are seeing a lot more pest problems, and it's because of this increased heat and increased stress. I have these two. Let me see if I can find these links for you so that you can go find them on your own. But they're interactive websites. So let's see. I highlight these. I wonder if I'll be able to put them in the chat. I should have done this earlier. So I wasn't sure if we'd have time in today's exercise. So here's one of them. Y'all can go check them out on your own. There's one. And here's the other. But I went ahead and clicked through both websites, so I'll show you what they say for Los Alamos if you're from there. So the question, how much warmer was your city? Now this is from 2019, and if you type in Los Alamos, New Mexico, it says that in the center there, 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit above normal for Los Alamos in 2019 compared to previous years. So we just had that example for a 1% increase in temperature. So that's a lot more water that is lost to evapotranspiration. And then this one is, how much hotter is your hometown than the year you were born? So you type in your hometown, and I typed in Los Alamos, even though I'm from Charleston, South Carolina, and I'm 41, so I put in 1980. And then it's interactive as you're scrolling, things are popping up. So I just tried to grab the screens to show you kind of what it feels like. So first it tells me, when you were born, the Los Alamos, New Mexico area could expect about 1 day per year to reach at least 90 degrees. And then it shows a little, train's going by, it shows a little graph of those temperatures rising through the years in the year that I was born. And then it says, today, and this website was from 2017, the Los Alamos, New Mexico area expects 2 days at or above 90 degrees per year on average. But then it gets scarier. Uh-oh, let's see, I'm going the wrong way. That would not be scarier. So by the time I'm 80, so in 39 years or less now, because this is old data, models show that there could be 11 of these very hot days, and the range is expected to be between 5 and 15. So as these temperatures are going up, on average, we need to be dealing with it as much as we can. And so what can we do? There's all different things we can try, and this is just a short list of things that come to my mind that I think we can do together. And so these are the things that give me climate hope, or even better is climate courage. So we can get involved, and one way we get involved is by participating in local gardening series like this. So thank you for getting involved so far. Pay close attention. So I really like this one because we really need our plant people and our gardeners and hikers to be observing our environment and look out for something that might be a new pest or might be a new problem that we haven't realized before, or something that's getting worse. And take a photo of it. Maybe you'll hear about it in the news. Maybe, a lot of times when my job, I get questions from all over the state. So when I get a question about scale on plum trees in Albuquerque, and I think, I think I know how to deal with that and I have an answer. But then I get the same question goes to from a different person, goes to the county agent, and then I get the same question from San Juan County and the same question from Doña Ana County, and all of a sudden I start to realize that and talking to people who have lived here and gardened a lot longer, that scale maybe wasn't as big a problem in previous years. So paying closer attention can really help us to be on the forefront. Plant smarter, not harder, and this is a whole talk, but basically, a few weeks ago we did native plants for this series, but plant smarter as in pick better species that are adapted for our environment, a focus on native species and also adapted, and then planting correctly. Even wonderful tree people, we're still planting, even in my own yard, I have things that are not planted correctly and could be optimized, and so the plant will be healthier with the amount of water I can provide it. So planting too deep is a huge problem we're seeing all over the state, and it's not just in New Mexico, it's planting too deep around the world. People are digging the holes too deep, and soil settles after planting, and so that's a big problem. So planting smarter, irrigating smarter, all of these things can help our chances. Funding research, I added this one in. So I am mostly an extension agent, but I also have a 25% research appointment. And so I know how difficult it can be to get research funding. And so putting our funds into that will be helpful. And then, of course, use mulch. So that's what we're talking about today. This is how mulch can help, even on this very small scale, in our gardens and yards. So here we have a long list of mulch benefits. Inhibiting weed germination and growth. I have some great photos and data on that to share with you. Holding in soil moisture. So it is like this coating on the surface that slows down that evapotranspiration from the soil. Preventing water and wind erosion. So just so slowing water down is a really great way to slow down water erosion. Preventing soil surface crusting. So surface soil crusting is when you get, especially in saline environments or with saline water that's applied, there can be a crust on the soil surface. It's like sometimes it's bright white, and that actually compounds the problem, because then water falls down and just runs off, and so it doesn't allow the water to get through that crust layer. Moderating soil temperature fluctuations is a really important one, and we're learning more about that as we are recommending trees that. So with climate change, there's this new list of climate ready trees for the whole Albuquerque area, and we're recommending trees that in 20 years ago, 40 years ago, were marginally cold hardy in that area. And if you pick a warm microclimate, and there's a chance that some of these species we should be and can be growing in our central New Mexico cities. And so, but there's some problems with when you pick a plant that is just marginally cold hardy. That means that if we get a very cold winter, you could have some dieback, and mulch can really help control the soil temperatures in the winter and protect those roots so that it may die back to the ground, kind of like oleander in Albuquerque dies back to the ground, whereas in Las Cruces it mostly stays above ground. So maybe it'll still grow back from the ground. So protecting plant roots from winter cold help to prevent frost heaving, which happens in some environments. And then those were all things about mulches in general, just using something to cover the soil. But specifically organic mulches, we don't mean certified organic, we mean that they were once living plant tissue. So whether it's leafy material or wood chips, organic mulches can provide nutrients to the soil. They can feed the soil biota, creating a healthier whole soil ecosystem. And over a period of years, increase organic matter in the soil to improve soil texture. And then over a longer period of time, they are helping the plant to access and the nutrients that are stored in the soil as well. So with that, let's get into where we want to apply mulches and think about where the plant roots are. So tree and shrub roots, where are they? We have this idea, this mental image of a tree. It's like perfect lollipop tree shape, and that the root structure must be almost a mirror image underground of that lollipop shape. And that's just not the way it grows. So the absorptive active roots tend to be shallow and extensive. So that doesn't mean that you don't get some roots that grow deep, especially with a heavy rainfall and with a real rocky soil. You can get deep roots, but the tiny little root hairs that are doing all of the work, those are still focused up very high in the soil surface. So in the general tree model, 90% of these absorptive active roots are in the top 3 feet of soil. So what's that, like 3 feet? And 75% of all the entire trees or shrubs, absorptive active roots in the top foot. And that they are extending laterally 2 to 4 times the height of the plant. So we really need to change how we're thinking about the root structure and therefore thinking about where we apply mulch. I just got this question this weekend from some apple growers up in Cedar Creek saying, how big of a mulch circle should they put underneath each of their newly planted apple trees? Well, the bigger you can get the circle, the better. So maybe when the tree is very small and you know that the root system is very small, just mulching that root area makes sense. But as the tree each year is getting bigger and bigger and pushing its roots out laterally, because you're watering out laterally, then you're going to need to also extend the mulch out there as well. So I would say apply the mulch where you know the roots are, and apply the mulch where you want the roots to grow, and where you're applying water is the same answer for both of those two. So then when we think about if it was a rainy day and you were to run under this tree, under the tree canopy, it's almost like an umbrella, so that a lot of trees, when they have the leaves on them, are shielding from rain falling down underneath. And so there's this concept of the canopy drip line. I think you can see my cursor here. So the canopy drip line would be about here, and this region is where we expect tree roots to proliferate. So watering only at the base is not good enough past the first few weeks or for a few months that the tree is in the ground. So really trying to encourage our irrigation systems, or however we're watering, and the mulch on top to extend from that canopy drip line and then out beyond as the tree gets older and older. Okay, so volcano mulching, this is a photo from the International Society of Arboriculture and treesaregood.org. This is because what the point is here, that volcano mulching is a no-no. But I think it's interesting, and I still agree that let's try to keep the mulch back away from the base of the trunk. And the rule is just a couple inches away, because it could cause, the idea is that by having that mulch up against the trunk, you could have caused some decay, rot, some pathogen or pest may be able to get in there. But interestingly, there's newer research that's showing that maybe volcano mulching wasn't as big a problem as we thought. And so for now, we're still recommending don't volcano mulch, and keep that little mulch-free zone to let the trunk breathe. But it's possible that the reason that data looked like volcano mulching was a problem was really that volcano mulching hides the fact that trees might be planted too deep. So here, deep planting is really a big problem. When you see a tree trunk that looks just like a pole coming straight out of the ground, that's a hint that it might be planted too deep. And it's important to pull back the mulch and pull back the soil, excavate a little bit to expose. You want to be able to see those topmost roots right there at the soil surface. And next time you're out in the woods, or you're in the bosque, or you're in the park, and you see these big trees that are doing really well, take a look at the base of them, and you'll be able to see this trunk flare that I'm talking about. So this natural form where the roots start, that shoulder needs to be right there above the ground, visible. So,
Marisa, we did have a mulch related question. I didn't know if you wanted to answer that now or wait.
Yeah, let's try.
So it's from Wendy Alexander. Can you see it?
Yes, I just opened it. Okay, haven't you heard you talk about pecan mulch? Yes, okay. So the question is it more beneficial or pretty much just the same as wood chips? Are there any issues as far as being prone to bacteria? Okay, great question, Wendy. I'm a big fan of pecan mulch. And so we don't have the data for New Mexico on how much better or worse it might be compared to other mulches. Basically, if you're covering the soil and you're slowing that evapotranspiration that's helping with the water, if you're covering at least a few inches, 4 inches for a woody mulch, and then it kind of varies depending on your material. But the point is, with the depth, is that weed control really is like controlling the seeds, the weed seed bank in the soil is with a couple inches of mulch. And so it's more the depth that's the important thing here. And for us in New Mexico, because we grow so many pecans, if you can get locally sourced pecan shell, then that can be really great. So I do have some comparisons of the different kinds. So we'll get to pecans more in a little bit, but I'm a total fan. Okay, so deep planting, don't plant too deep. Keep mulch away from the trunk. We're still following that rule for now, but it might be, so see how you can tell that this tree trunk is getting wider there at the base? That is a sign that it's not planted too deep, or hopefully not. We can also use mulch in our veggie beds. We can use them in our flower beds. We can use them in our container pots. So whether it's pecan shell, pine straw, woody mulch, leaf litter, use it all. So these are photos from Nisa Patterson, but I also use different kinds of mulch in my potted plants year round. Okay, I want to get into our mulch study a little bit. So the study that these pictures are showing, this is our Ag Science Center. It's a research farm in Los Lunas. So it's just a small study. And here, Alyssa Freeman is helping me install the study. This was in September of 2019, so almost a little over a year and a half ago. And so this is the layout of this study. There are only 12 trees in the study. Each plot, each of these little squares is 1.5 meters by 1.5 meters with a little 1 gallon native New Mexico tree. It's the New Mexico privet, also called New Mexico olive, planted in the center. And then at each tree, we have 3 soil probes buried right next to the tree root. So the first probe is just very much close to the surface, just 4 inches deep. The second probe is 12 inches deep. And then the third probe is 2 feet deep. So we're looking at all different, issues with these trees as they establish, and the weediness, and we'll be interested to look at the roots also and see how these trees are doing. So I do have some data to share with you. I wanted to go back to this picture. So in this image, I'm going to try to point to it. Here we have wood chip mulch, and so it's 4 inches deep. This is the bare ground treatment, which is bare here, but you can see in other pictures that it became weedy really fast. And then this is an example of this rock. I picked the landscape rock that is the most commonly used in landscapes in New Mexico, based on a bunch of landscape designers and maintenance crew who said that they use this type of rock a lot. So there is no weed fabric underneath either of these 2 types of mulch. So sometimes people talk about rock mulch as a type of mulch, and it is in the case of our definition of something just being on the soil surface that's going to slow evapotranspiration. But this wood chips are an example of that organic, woody, fibrous mulch material. So in this case, I'm only comparing these 3 situations. And in this image, I don't have the timestamp of this photo, but you can already see that in some of these bare grounds, the weeds are already pretty bad compared to these other plots. In the rock and wood chip plots, we had more weeds that showed up right on the margin. So right here, for example, right on the margin, where there's a benefit of that this area got watered, and so maybe this got a little bit damp. So there's still weed seeds there, but they weren't covered by the rocks. They weren't controlled. And I have some data to share too. So soil moisture. So this is only looking at the bare ground treatment. And those are 4 plots that are all averaged together. And so we're looking at time as on the x-axis from September 2019 until January 2020. And then on the y-axis, we have volumetric soil moisture. And so volumetric soil moisture would max out at 50% soil moisture. Like if you had basically the soil underneath a lake maybe at 50%, whereas you can get soil moisture down very low, but it won't ever really go to 0 because the way that water adheres to soil particles. So there's some water in the soil. It doesn't mean it's necessarily available for the plants to take it up. But what we're looking at here is the soil moisture at these 3 depths. So we have the 4-inch depth, that's that pale blue, real close to the surface. The 12 inches is bright blue, and then the 2 feet deep is that dark blue color. And so what I'm pointing to here is, you might notice, what are these spikes? Well, they are irrigation events. So that's when the plots were irrigated, and you can see the moisture go up, and then over the next several days, it dries out. And then the next thing I wanted to point out is you can see that there were a bunch of smaller irrigation events when the trees were first planted. So in that first month or so, I was watering. It was really hot. They were installed the weekend before Labor Day. So that's why we were watering so much then, and then over time backed off. And also I noticed that this is an example where if you look at the pale blue, you see that spike, but then it's not so apparent in the blue or the dark blue. And that's because the deeper you go, the water didn't go down deep enough, because this wasn't an irrigation event, it was a rain event. And so you can look through the data. So I went to weather.nmsu.edu and I pulled for a similar time range the weather station data there at our research farm, and that you can access the data from all different places around the state. But so sure enough, on that, like November 21st, there was irrigation event on that day. So those aren't individual days, I believe they're timestamps through the, well, maybe it is the 21st and 22nd. But anyway, that's what that event was. And I wanted to take this moment to really give a shout out to Coco Ross. So if you're on here and you have heard of Coco Ross, give me a thumbs up. Thumbs up, anybody? And then if you are on here and you already are a Coco Ross volunteer, let's see, give yourself one of the other, one of those other things you can, there's a
smiley
heart
face.
one. Yeah, you smile. Yeah, okay. So use a laughing one or a wink, use another one of the emojis and brag about your volunteerism. Anybody? Do you know about Coco Ross? Okay, oh, Anne, all right, yay, we have somebody who's a volunteer. Okay, so Coco Ross is a strange acronym. It stands for Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow Network. CocoRoss.org. And so when I logged on just like an hour, 2 hours ago, it said that over 12,000 people had entered their home precipitation data today, in the last 24 hours. So it's a really cool system. And you can go in there and look at the data for your county. So because I knew from that weather station that we had some rain around that date, I was able to go in and pull up. I just picked that November 20th to November 22nd. And so you can see I'm in Valencia County in Las Lonas, you can see the people that were entering, almost over half an inch, several people entered on that day. And remember that the data, so the way that Coco Ross works is you sign up, they send you a rain gauge. That's a special kind, and I can't remember the cost, maybe around $30. And then you get a special code. You get to enter your rain data each day and from the day before. So even though it looks like this rain fell on November 22nd, really that's the entry from the day before. And I did look up your county just today, because I saw that you got a little bit of rain. You can zoom in a little and see that these are the different Coco Ross volunteers who entered data today from yesterday's rain gauge. So the T means trace. They got a couple drops, but it wasn't enough to measure. But this is a really interesting tool. If you go on the map, I recommend if you go look at your county data and see that nobody in your area is entering, then that's a great reason to sign up. You need your data. If you see that your next door neighbor is the one that is, or maybe down the street or around the corner is the one that's another volunteer, all the more reason to sign up, because we all know that even from one house to another, you can have really different rainfall amounts in New Mexico. So we need that data, and people are using it for all different kinds of work. Okay. Back to the mulch study. And so we were looking at soil moisture, and we saw those irrigation events, and they dried down over time. And then this is a similar graph showing over time. We've got the soil temperature at these same 3 depths. So again, this is just the bare ground by itself. So that's kind of the control in this experiment, where there's the 4-inch depth, the 12-inch, and the 24-inch. And so just look how clean that is, where the reason you see that this is spiking on this 4-inch data is that daily comparison, or excuse me, at that shallow level, the daily highs and lows really affect your soil temperature. And the deeper you go, the more constant from night to day your soil temperatures are. But sure enough, as we go into the fall and into the winter, then your soil moisture, your soil temperatures all drop down lower and lower. And there's supposed to be, oh, here we go. I did put this on in case, just to give you reference, that 30 degrees is 86 Fahrenheit, and 10 degrees Celsius is about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So just for some comparison there. Again, these are the averages of just the control. But now let's take the 3 treatments together and look at that same 4-inch depth, and look at the bare ground versus the rock versus the wood chip in green. So what we see is that bare ground is the same data that we were looking at before. It was pale blue, paler blue earlier. I'm sorry, these colors are so, I don't know, they're kind of abrasive, but the pale blue there is that bare ground. So sure enough, you can see that at that real close to the surface, the daily fluctuation in temperature. And for the rock, it's reduced, but still there you can see the daily fluctuation. And for wood chips, it's even reduced further. So that's interesting by itself. And there's also data from the 12-inch and from the 24-inch. But I think I want to hear these 2 references. Now let's get into soil moisture. So at that same real shallow depth, what we're seeing here is that over time, and we're talking about percent soil moisture, 30% is the highest on this y-axis here. It looks like that one day it went higher. So this is at that shallow region. And what I want to show you, I think I pointed it. Yeah, so what we're seeing here is that on these days, I'm not trying to point to the irrigation event. I'm trying to point to those hours before the irrigation. That's where you see the most extreme differences. And so in each of these cases, the wood chips plots are slightly more moist than the rock or the bare ground. Now, are they going to be statistically different? I haven't gotten that far yet, so we will keep checking. But this data is being collected every 15 minutes from the probes, and there's a little solar paneled data logger, and so the data is being sent to the cloud, and so there's a lot of data to go through. And I am searching for a graduate student. If you know somebody who is interested in soil moisture data, in climate change, in mulch, then have them contact me, because I have a bunch of data that needs to be mined, and I'm looking for the right person to do it. Let's see, I have a couple more photos of just the plots as of today. Excuse me, this is another huge portion of it about the weediness. So that I called it, sometimes I have to call it bare ground, because I didn't keep on top of the weeds enough. We can tell that this photo was taken in the winter because that's London Rocket. So that's maybe late winter. And so on the same day, that's one of the examples of the bare ground plot, one of the rock, one of the wood chip. And I do have some preliminary data to show of this. So just within the first 6 months of the study, the bare ground weediness was so much higher than in the rock or the wood chip. And it came down to, weedy fresh weights were 99.2 decreased in rock plots compared to the bare ground, and 99.8% decrease in wood chip compared to the bare ground. So the weed control factor for our annual weeds from the weed seed bank, it really is remarkable, and it shouldn't be overlooked, especially when so many of our municipalities are looking at ways to get away from using herbicides and are banning glyphosate, the product that's in Roundup. We need more tools to control weeds, and so this may be a very good one for us. So stay tuned. There's going to be more data on fresh weights collected and dry weights collected throughout the entire study. Now we get to maybe what's going to be the most important thing is how do these trees establish? So these are the averages of the different tree height growths. So if you take the original height and then you add how tall it is just as of a few weeks ago, that's the amount of growth. And so if you look at the data here, we have the 3 treatments: control, rock, and wood chip. And we have mean growth in centimeters. And it looks so obvious and really shocking how much more growth there was in the 2 mulched treatments versus the bare ground. However, in our preliminary analyses, there were no statistically significant differences between these tree heights, and partly because the study is so small. So maybe by the end of this study, we'll be wrapping this up in September of this year. That'll be the 2-year mark. We'll be able to have differences that show up as being statistically different. Maybe we'll have to dig up the trees and cut up the roots and do more analysis in order to find some of the differences that may not be visible in the height. And one reason the height may not be as quite strong enough to really talk about tree growth is because this particular native tree, the New Mexico privet, is a tree that is multi-branched, multi-trunked. And so it's possible that the plant, so if we were to harvest the above ground plant matter and weigh that, it might be a way to look at the differences. I want to try to end the study without killing the trees. So I hope that something like height will really show us what we're dealing with. So these are the pictures from this morning. So here's that bare ground plot. And it's kind of hard to, you can kind of get an idea of the plot size. There's one of the rock plots. And so sure enough, you can see what I mean, that the tree might not be taller, but it does seem to be quite a bit more vibrant. And then compared to one of the wood chip plots. And the black containers that are there, that's something else for a whole nother presentation. These are protecting these in-ground clear glass tubes. We have a special camera called a mini rhizotron. And the mini rhizotron is a cylindrical shaped camera that you push down into the soil tube, and it will image the roots if they're there. And so we like to, that's another thing I need the students to analyze, or data from these images of the root growth in the different plots. Okay, so I have a bunch more. So living mulches, yeah, great question, thanks. I'm seeing a couple of the questions. All right, Joe's been a CocoRAS member for a long time, good. All right, so yesterday I visited Los Poblanos in Albuquerque, and I asked the landscape guru there, Wes Brittenham, to show me around at some of the mulch plots that he thought were interesting and that I might like. So he showed me the incredible rose garden that is all mulched with pecan shell. So I did take this picture showing the pecan shell that is from, I guess it's from last summer. So this is the second year. And this is another plot that had just been added with fresh pecan shell. So that's the comparison. As it ages, it does get paler in color. And so that's what pecan might look like. I know that the wind is not what pulled the pecan bits out of the corner of that one picture. That's where somebody stepped in and scraped it out. So these pecan shells do work as great as mulch. Here's another one. On Sunday, I got to visit a very active master gardener in Corrales. And so she was showing me her mulched plots. Her entire garden yardscape is mulched. And so on that left picture, that's an example of mulch that was applied last year. And on the left, the more faded was mulch that was applied 2 years ago as a comparison. I also invited Larry Devon to send photos of the gardens there at Peak, because I heard, Kristen told me that there were planters that had 3 different types of mulch as examples. And so on the left is like a wood chip mulch. In the middle, I think it's a rock mulch. And on the right, we have a pine straw mulch. Pine straw, you know, even a friend of mine in Las Cruces called and said, do you have anywhere that where should I donate or give? What should I do with all of this pine needles that I raked up from my backyard? And I was like, put them right back in your backyard. There's no reason they shouldn't be there. They're only doing good things. We tend to have this idea like they're harming something, but they really aren't. And then talking to some gardeners on the East Coast, pine mulch is a super high dollar product, and so people are making money off of collecting pine mulch and selling it as a mulch, you know, for landscape gardens. So something that just because it hasn't caught on here doesn't mean that it won't. And I want to get into your questions more, so I'm not gonna. I have the link here. Let me go to this one and let's see. What I want to do is let's see, go to the slide sorter. I'm going to give you the link to this so that you can compare these on your own, because this is this document that does a really good job of summarizing the research on the different kinds of mulch and the pros and cons for each one. So I'm going to put this in the chat. Oops. Okay, so I did zoom in on these, and we can come back to them if we have time, but this basically, just to make it pop out better for viewers who are looking at their phone, it's going to compare, and I just picked some of the ones I was most interested in, and I kind of spliced them together. We've got stone, rock, or gravel, barks. They include pine, red cedar, redwood, etc., all in the same category. Then there's compost. Some people are actually using their compost material as a mulch, as on top, and not working it into the soil. The one that I wanted to point out here that I'm really worried about with rock is that it might be hot, depending on the type of rock, depending on where it's placed. I'm afraid that the urban heat island effect with rock may be something we need to look into further. Recycled green wastes and fresh tree trimmings are also covered in these in this one table of that document. So Larry Devon added more photos of the beautiful penstemons. I can't wait to go up and visit, but I wasn't able to this past week. I'll try to go in 2 more weeks when I heard you might be exploding with penstemon colors. And then I have pictures from my own yard. So this is a photo of in the winter of 2019, before my yard was landscaped, before it was mulched. And so I have like my little irises that I planted in the fall before. And then you can see there's different kinds of weeds. It looks like London rocket, really, mostly. And then this is my backyard. Oh, you know what? I think maybe I'll have more. Okay, so this is my backyard in March of 2019, and those weeds don't look like they're that bad, but they're really dense there. And I had friends come to town, and they went, you know, or they're just wonderful people, and they weeded my yard for me. So I wanted to brag about how much mulch has made a difference in my own yard without letting you think that I didn't have a weed problem before, because I really did. So again, that's that picture from my front yard. And then this one I just took an hour ago of the same spot. So those are the same iris, the same tree in the background, that mulberry. And now the yard has been landscaped. So there's some lower areas and some berms. So it's actually a berm in the forefront, but I have not weeded this section. And so you can see there's some little green there. I think, like, you know, this is like a mulberry leaf. These are bulbs that bloomed back in February and are now died back. Here is one, the purple silver leaf nightshade. that, so these perennial weeds are still a problem, but compared to what it was in years before, it really doesn't even compare. So I still have to weed these plots a little bit, and you still have to replenish the mulch over time. It does get so thin that the weed seeds that are still viable underneath there can still come through. So it's not a zero management option, but so here's another photo showing before my yard was landscaped and after. So there's all kinds of plants and rocks and mulch and a combination. On the left here, I've got wood chips in the foreground, and then some crusher fines and smaller rock there closer to my patio. And then the picture on the right, I was trying to take a picture of the leaf curl from aphids on my red twig dogwood. But now years have gone by. What I like is that in the underground, mid-background, you can't see any weeds, right? So that area was really weedy before, I promise it was. And then this area is mulched with crusher fine along the side of my house. And, you know, I'm not trying to, it doesn't look that special. There's some plants that are important to me there. There's a couple honeysuckles that are just coming out, and that artemisia in the foreground. So you can see that the artemisia around it is kind of got that brown circle. That's the leaf litter from last year that I just kind of scoot underneath it. And in another couple of weeks, the artemisia is going to be so big, you won't even be able to see that brown section. So I just let the leaf litter fall. But I did just weed this area. And so when I weeded it, I took a picture of the weeds I got out. So this is the whole, that entire section, you know, it's like 10 feet by 30 feet. These are the weeds that came out. So you can see here that there's a couple of these London rockets. There's a couple different kinds of that look like a type of dandelion, or and then this is this perennial bindweed. So it still comes up. And these are the elm seedlings that are just coming up from this year's elm seeds. So you do have a problem where new seed that comes in can still germinate. It is a little bit easier to pull them because it takes a while for the roots to get a strong hold, but it's so much better than it was before. This is a neighbor's yard, and I asked if I could take a picture, and I actually invited him to join today, so I don't know if he's on here with us, because this is an example of a nicely rock mulched yard that does not have plastic underneath, which is good. We're not recommending plastic anymore, or any kind of weed barrier anymore. But over the years, the new dirt, you know, that soil that has blown in, and the weed seeds that have blown in on top, they are now taking hold. So unfortunately, with a lot of time that passes, you do need to do upkeep. That means adding a fresh layer of rock. It might mean pulling these before they set seed, which I know it's a problem. And I guess I really want to reach out to people who are dealing with weeds in their yard, because before my yard was landscaped, I was sent to codes, or I got like the codes enforcement letter by my mailbox that I had too many weeds out there. So I really do understand how hard it can be to control these. This image I got last summer. It's from eastern New Mexico. I want to say it wasn't, maybe from Artesia, but the question was, what's wrong with my tree? And the first picture, you think nothing, it looks okay. But if you look closer at the leaves, they are showing signs of chlorosis. And then if you look closer at the whole situation, look at that black plastic. That is a sign that even if you're watering over here, this tree really is not getting the water that it needs. So pulling back the black plastic underneath this and making sure that this wood chip or shredded bark area is thick enough to reduce weeds, but that is going to be really important. One more last tip is, and here we are right at 8, but hopefully y'all can stay for questions, is that depending on how you apply your water, if that's something that a couple people have brought up, and this researcher in outside of El Paso is concerned about this, that if you have 4 inches or more of wood chips and we get 1/10 of an inch of rain, it's not going to be enough to get through, right? And if you are irrigating with a little drip emitter that's just dripping, 1 gallon an hour, and you have it on for 10 minutes, that's not going to be enough water to get down through the layers. So we either need to be putting our irrigation system under, or our soaker hoses or inline emitters underneath the mulch, or we need to be watering enough so that it really does soak through the mulch layer and get down to the earth, and confirm that there's not something that is a barrier that's keeping water and air from moving down into the soil. Okay, so with that, thank you very much. And I am really happy to be able to share all this detail with you.
I'm a fan of the pun. That was a good pun. So we do have a couple questions, and feel free to enter your questions in, everybody, as we answer this one, or these couple. So this one is, how deep do you recommend mulch should be? Unfortunately, we moved recently to a house that has rock, retaining wall, etc., but no plantings yet. The weeds are unbelievable. Can we lay mulch down to help kill the current weeds?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the answer is it's like kind of, you know, there's no easy answer for any of these things, but the recommendation from around the country is that 4 inches of mulch should be enough to block the sunlight getting through to the soil surface. That allows those little seeds in the soil might still germinate, but they're not going to grow up through that, or it diminishes their growth enough so they wear themselves out before they can get to the top. So 4 inches is a minimum. There is some concern that, like, if you're using leaf litter, that 4 inches of leaf litter could, as it gets really compacted, and so maybe it's not allowing water to go through it. So it kind of depends on what you're using as a mulch, but I recommend starting with 4 inches. Going up to 6-10 inches, you can get a lot more weed control the deeper you get the mulch.
Wow. Okay. So this is a question, and also something I'm curious, like what would be the best place to buy mulch? Because it sounds like you would need quite a bit. And then also, does it matter, like, if you want a certain type of chip or type of color, is that okay for people to pick those? Yeah. Or is there a certain variety you think is best?
So I didn't look up the colored research for other areas, but a lot of this stuff, we may have the answer, or the answer is out there potentially for Washington State or for Georgia. I don't think we have the data on color or all these different types or all these different depths for New Mexico yet. So that's something I am interested in studying and plan to incorporate in the next couple of decades of my career. So I'm interested in different soil types, different plant species, different types of mulch depths. And something else we just took, colors. So, yeah, so that right now we're just lumping all of these fibrous woody mulches in together, whether it's dyed a little bit red, or it's a darker, or it's bleached out from the sun, because most of those benefits are going to be consistent, right? So it's like, as long as you're slowing evapotranspiration, you're slowing weed seed germination, then those other benefits kind of fall in line.
Okay. So we have a bindweed question, but I'm going to save that for the end, because these ones are more like clumped together. So this is, how well does drip irrigation work if you need to water 2 to 3 times the diameter of the canopy? Yeah,
right. I know it is hard. So there's different kinds of drip. There's inline drip emitters, and sometimes it's called, one of the trade names is Metaphem. So I'll type that in because it took me a long time to figure out what people were saying. So I think it's Metaphem. Now I've forgotten, is it Metaphem? I think that's what it's called. So that is and I'm not recommending that particular product, but the idea is that it's I wish I had mine with me, but it's a skinny tube that then has the emitters spaced, and you can get 6-inch spacing or 12-inch or 18-inch spacing. So when my yard was landscaped by a local landscaper, they used Metaphem in a spiral around my existing mulberry trees, and then where those emitters were is where they decided to put a couple other things, like that Nolina grass, or some of the other plants that they installed along with the irrigation. So that's a really great way to get a better coverage, but still be using drip. Another way is so if you have a drip emitter that just comes out straight, and you can put a emitter on it that's like 2 gallons per hour, 1 gallon per hour, whatever the different rates. You can put a T there, or a triple, and then have that go off so that you can go around a larger area around the plant. One thing that I've seen people do is to create a circle with their inline emitter. That's a big problem potentially in the future, because it can be strong enough that it doesn't allow the tree to grow. So instead of a circle of emitters around the tree, having it be a Y where you just put a plug on each end like a horseshoe, that can be a lot better. So that's one way to do it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so these are two separate vegetable garden questions that I'm combining. One is, do you recommend mulch for vegetable gardens? And the second is, how deep should it be?
Okay, so yes and yes. So mulch for vegetable gardens, for one, it depends on what kind of garden you're doing. So if you have a raised bed and you don't have a weedy problem, then you don't need to worry as much about that 4-inch depth for weed control. But the deeper you get it, the more soil moisture retention benefits you'll get. So even a 1/2 inch or an inch will help to shade that soil and keep it cooler and hold more of the moisture. But again, a little bit deeper is better.
Sorry, go ahead.
One thing to remember though is that just the same way that a deep layer of mulch inhibits weed seeds from germinating and growing, it will also inhibit native flower seeds, vegetable seeds that you have in the ground. So you're either what I've seen some people do is you mulch the entire area and then, like make a little hole to put your seeds, and you just have like a space, holes spaced around, or you can wait until the plants have come up if you're planting from seed and then mulch. But I have noticed that there are a bunch of wildflowers coming up in my yard that I've put down the seed on top of the mulch. So unfortunately, as weed seed comes in, the same thing happens, right? So so some of these wildflowers, I'll just kind of use my trowel to make a little space in the mulch, dig a little hole, put sunflower seed in, and then walk away, and it'll come back up. The sunflowers come up through it really well.
Okay, good to know. That was actually going to be my question, is before or after germination. So great. This person is asking, is there a wood chip shortage right now?
Oh, no. But depending on your community and what resources you have. So I know that like in Albuquerque, there are a couple different landscape companies, like tree pruning companies, that give away mulch, but you have to take it by like a truck full. So there's some constraints there. There are a couple companies that sell large, like bulk of different types of mulch in Corrales and in Albuquerque, and I imagine these other areas as well. I don't have an exact answer for you, and we are working on a new extension publication that's going to include mulch resources within each county, but we don't have that quite ready yet. So you can call your city and see if there's a city waste program, if they have mulch that you can pick up. That would be great. You can wait till fall and let your leaves fall where they fall, or you can scoop them up around to protect plants for the winter, and then that breaks down. Or earlier today I went and dug up some of the different kinds of mulch in my yard. So this is just like leaf litter that well, I don't want to make a mess on my computer, but anyway, the leaf litter, it's over time, as you walk on it, it crunches down and becomes a really nice, so like some of these leaves are still big, right, from last year.
Yeah, Jennifer Mackey actually just said that Los Alamos does indeed have a free mulch program. And the county, I should say, and but it doesn't look as nice as some of the bark mulches. Yeah,
so each place is going to have a different mix. Sometimes it costs more to get the like playground grade. It's all one size and doesn't have any trash or anything in it. This also is just the catkins from my yard. So it's hard to show. So the catkin litter, that just becomes mulch in my yard. And then the wood chips down underneath was a lot darker. So it's like, yeah. So this was sourced as a truckload from Albuquerque. And I'm based in Los Lunas. So I know that they delivered down here. Also, if you know, they're getting into tree pruning, and you can rent a chipper and create your own mulch. I do know a couple of landscape geniuses in Albuquerque who in the fall, they go around neighborhoods and pick up bags of other people's leaf litter and use that themselves. So there's some workarounds.
Okay, so I know that it's like 8:11 now. So do you have time for one more question? Is that okay?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we're getting a lot of like great presentations. People are picking up mulch this weekend.
Yay.
So inspiration.
Take pictures, send me. I'll put my email in the chat.
Yeah, please do. So this one is about the pH, the soil pH. Is there a concern using wood chips or bark for mulch relative to maintaining an appropriate pH?
I missed the beginning of the question.
So is there a concern in using wood chips or bark for mulch relative to maintaining an appropriate soil pH level?
Right. No, this is addressed in one of the articles I linked earlier, but for a couple reasons. One is that some of these materials like pine needles are known to be more acidic. And so the idea would be that maybe you could help some of the high pH problems we have by adding pine mulch that breaks down over time, but it actually doesn't work that way. You would need so much pH. It's changing pH for any length of time is extremely difficult, and we're not recommending it. So even if the materials you might use have a very different pH from your soil, the reality is it's not going to be enough to change your soil pH. And similarly with like diseases with allelopathic chemicals. So yes, some plants have allelopathic chemicals and some plants have more. Those are chemicals that are known to diminish the plant growth for other plants in the surrounding. But on a landscape scale in your yard with breakdown of material, it's not an issue of allelopathic issue.
Good to know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
There's always more. Keep going.
It's great. No, it's really good. I love it. So I guess they were in southern Colorado, and there's a lot of red clay soil, which has infiltration is very hard. So I guess that question had to do with that.
Well, that's a very good point. That in clay soil, sometimes the problem can be that soil's not drying out fast enough. Mm-hmm. So for clay soils, there may be different soil mulch options. Maybe the mulch would be still really good for weed control, but maybe a thinner layer is all you would want to do as far as your moisture. And the best option for clay soils is to plant things that can handle clay soils. And so that is a column I'm working on, a list of plants that like clay. And so stay tuned for that.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah, I
mean, I'm excited about it. What about using mulch from trees, leaves, clippings that have been sprayed with herbicide? A concern for getting from neighbors or city?
Yeah. So, I mean, the question, it kind of ties into, is something like a disease on the original plant tissue or a pest going to be a problem? I mean, in the best case scenario, it's like, okay, you have all this bark. What happened to that tree? So if something was killed by herbicide, then I would not want to use that mulch on my yard. But as far as, some small portion, is not going to be a problem. And for the most part, people are not using herbicides on tree tissue, right? Because that would kill the tree.
Sure. Yeah.
And depending on the chemical that was used, there would be some window of time where the chemical breaks down and that material becomes just as good a mulch as something else. And then the question too about pests that are disease that's in the tissue, we're because of the benefits of mulch really outweigh any of the small risks associated with infection. First of all, we don't have very many bacterial, fungal, viral problems that might be residual in something like mulch material, but there are issues with transporting like firewood from spot to spot, and the same can be true for different types of mulch. So if you can find a local source or a bagged, treated source from like a garden center, then that helps to avoid those risks, which again are very, very small.
Great, awesome. So just because I said I was going to get to this, do you have any recommendations for controlling bindweed?
Well, anecdotally, we can recommend the thickest layer of mulch you can possibly get. So 12 inches, 16 inches, the bindweed probably will still grow through, but when you pull it, it's like, I don't know, pulling like a spaghetti noodle out of the bowl of spaghetti. It's very satisfying and much easier to do. So that will really diminish them. That's again anecdotal. We have the weed science extension specialist, and a bunch of us have applied for several funding opportunities to study weed control for bindweed, and so far we've been rejected each time. So the fact that somebody just asked it, I mean, it's like send a photo of your weed problem with bindweed. Actually, Wes Brittenham at Los Poblanos yesterday said, "Oh, we need somebody to figure out something for bindweed because they're having to deal with it all the time too." And I have it in my yard, and I don't have the picture of it here, but the bindweed is growing up through the rock in that there's like bigger river rock area that doesn't have a thick layer of mulch. It's just a layer of river rock. So the bindweed is coming up through there, and because it's coming up through there, I can assume that it would be in my entire yard, except that it's mulched with thick pressure fine or thick wood chip. So if you find something, then let us know. If you'd like to have your yard be a possible study site, if we ever get funding, then that's something we'll keep in mind too.
Nice, good. So text or email your pictures.
Yes, please. Oh yeah, I was going to do that. Email mulch pictures.
Someone is saying, I wish I could provide funding and research for bindweed control.
Yeah. Fair
enough. So that is all of our questions for tonight. If I missed your question, I am sorry. Marisa's email, she just entered it into the chat. Feel free to email her. Thank you so much, Marisa. As always, you're an amazing presenter, and I think everyone here would agree. And thank you to all of the people that tuned in tonight. If you're still with us, thank you so much. Those questions were valuable. And if you're interested, thank you so much for tuning into the series. If you did so, thanks. We're hoping to do it again next year. Peak does have a couple programs coming up, one on May 21st, which is this coming Friday, which is quasars, blazars, and radio galaxies, and it's an astronomy program. And we also have a on tap series program coming up, which is Recreation Renaissance Panel. So if you are interested in having a startup, are curious to know if you can make your side hustle an actual business, tune into that. That is on May 24th at 5:30. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And thank you so much, Marisa.
Yeah, thank you. I'm getting through some of these other questions we didn't get to about living mulches. That's a really interesting one too. So we'll just have to, maybe I'll write a column using some of these questions. Thank you very much.
I think that would be great, for sure. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, have a good night.
You too, Marisa.